I am California of the past.
I am California of the past. I am California of the past.
My name is A.T. Richardson. I was born in Dracut, which is a suburb of Lowell, Massachusetts. My folks came to San Diego when I was a small boy on account of my mother's health. We attended the Congregational Church at San Diego, and Dr. Stephen Norton, who was the minister, was a brother of Dean E.C. Norton of Pomona College. So we heard quite a bit about Pomona College. And on being graduated from high school, I attended Pomona College. It was a little difficult for me to finance affairs. I largely worked my way through the school, but just about 3 months before commencement, I learned that I would have to have my bills paid in order to get my diploma, and I didn't have the money in sight. One day, one of the boys, in going into chapel, asked if I knew anybody that wanted to correspond for a Pomona paper. And I said, do they pay anything? He said, 5 cents an inch. I said, I'll do it. What do I do? And he told me how about getting the copy ready, how to get the copy ready and send it down by mail and get it to the office at the earliest possible moment. So I took the job and wrote everything in sight. While taking my last examination, the owner of the paper, Sidney M. Haskell, sent word up to the college and wanted me to come down and see him. He offered me the job, but I told him I wasn't interested, that I was going to study mechanical engineering. He said, how are you going to finance it? And I said, I haven't gotten that far. He finally said if I would agree to stay with him a year, that he'd like to have me come on. It's interesting to remember that Fred Llewellyn had been the reporter on the paper, The Progress, and he had decided that he could make more money as a linotype operator on the Times in Los Angeles. He took that job. Unfortunately, he was one of the 17 that were killed when the Times building was dynamited in 1912. I came down the day after commencement and took his place on the paper. I knew very little about writing news or collecting it, or working on doing newspaper work at all. Arthur M. Dole, who had graduated previously from the college and had had experience writing for some of the Los Angeles papers, showed me around a day or two and helped me out, and I always appreciated that. The next year, first let me say that there were only 7 of us in getting the paper out, doing the mechanical work and everythh else. We had no linotype. We had what was called a simplex machine and operated by 2 girls who could handle about as much type as it would take 3 men to set. As I told you before, I started to work for the paper the day after commencement in 1903. Another member of the class of 1903, Charles Bent, B-E-N-T, went to work for the Review. I knew nothing about his going to work at the time, and was very much surprised to find him as my competitor a few days after I started in. Things went along for a few months, and one day Mr. Haskell called me in and told me that I was through. And I was thunderstruck because the one thing I didn't want was to be fired. I knew that I wasn't really making good, but he said that I had purposely left out an important news story. It was the fact that Charlie Bent had been arrested for riding his bicycle on the sidewalk. I begged like a good fellow. I didn't want to be fired, and he finally consented to give me another chance. We ran along through the first year. And toward the end of 1904, we found out that Mr. Haskell wanted to sell the paper. The foreman, Mr. Stevens, and I decided that if the paper was sold, we'd be out of a job. So we went around to some of our friends to see if we could finance it. The only money we had was what was Mr. Haskell owed us in back salary. We were laughed at by one of the banks, and then we knew the president of the First National Bank, and he suggested we see if our folks couldn't loan us some money. We gathered together $4,000, and the bank loaned us about $5,000, and we proceeded to negotiate with Mr. Haskell to buy the plant at $15,500. We took over the management of the paper in February of 1905. Things didn't go too well the first year. It was in justice to Stevens and myself, I think it should be stated that we had been having dry years and the economy wasn't good in 1905. At the end of 1905, we were unable to make the first payment due Mr. Haskell on the mortgage. He came to Pomona and wanted to foreclose. Mr. Walker, president of the banks, told him that he couldn't foreclose, that he hadn't given the boys a fair chance. And the bank proceeded to loan us another $1,000 to make the first payment due.